Welcome to Craig Lake State Park. The main entrance to Craig Lake State Park is located off US 41, about 40 miles west of Marquette, which is probably the biggest city nearby. This park was probably the most challenging for us to get to of all 103 parks in the system, just because it's not what you think of as a typical state park, at least not in terms of its access.
The DNR says it is the state's most remote state park. The main access road is 7 miles long of dirt. There's some rocks, there's some mud holes, depending on how much rain there has been and the weather that's been going on. One thing to take note of is the name of the access road has changed over the years. I know my GPS, which had an older map on it, and we have an older brochure, refers to it as Keewaydin Lake Road. But it's now Nelligan Lake Road, and the road goes by both lakes. So for some reason, they decided to change the name of the road to a different lake. But either one of those will get you in there. It's interesting because when you pull in, there is a huge warning sign from the DNR about how scary the road in is. Like, it's one lane, there's not much place to turn around.
Like, it even tells you, turn back now if you don't think that you can visit us.
Yeah,
like, it is kind of scary.
It says go to Van Riper, which is a nice park not that far down the road, which is a regular state park with a campground and everything. And it talks about you might need a high clearance vehicle and 4-wheel drive. And so we did hesitate with the road trek. We have 4-wheel drive, but we still have clearance issues with it because it's not very high off the road. But we decided to go for it. And the road itself wasn't that bad. We went really slow at some times because of some of the dips and, the holes and that kind of thing to go through. But quite honestly, that was because the van is high and we're carrying our house on our back. We're like a turtle. So if we start to rock, everything can shift.
The macaroni might come flying out of the cupboard at you.
Yes, killer macaroni. You never know. So it's one of those things where we had to go extra slow. I think if you have a truck, an SUV of any kind, you're fine going back there. There are a few places where there are some larger rocks that you kind of want to either steer around or go up over and be careful not to scrape on. So the main road, I think, is fine. I'm certain that at different times of the year that can change. So in the wet season, maybe in the spring or in the fall, you're going to have bigger mud holes. You're going to have some traction issues, maybe that kind of thing. The state park entrance sign actually has an open and closed road sign, which is the first time we've seen that as well.
Well, I do believe that's because this is one where that road would not be passable in the winter, and they don't even try to keep it open in the winter. So it would be snowshoe or cross-country ski in only, but nothing is maintained. It is an all-access trail, though. Like, you're sharing the trail with snowshoers, hikers, cross-country skiers, and so it's available to get to in the winter. You just have to get to it of your own accord.
I think it's the first time we've driven the road trek on a snowmobile trail because it's a shared use trail. It's 7 miles of shared use trail for everybody to use it. So you have to be careful also because it is one lane and pretty narrow in some places. So go slow, not just because of the terrain, but because you don't know who's coming around the curve in the opposite direction. I was surprised when we got all the way back there how busy it was. The parking lot was full. We didn't have anywhere to put the van. And in fact, I ended up double parking the road trek and stayed with it while you went in and took a look at the campsites and the trail and the lake. And so that was, what we had to do because I didn't want to block somebody in. I figured somebody may come out if they were only there for the day and I didn't want to block them in. So we did that. There is a second road into the park. It's called Nestoria Road. And that is one that I would not recommend unless you have 4-wheel drive. High clearance vehicle would be the best thing to do. We took part of it with the road trek and we finally ended up turning around because it's only 4 miles instead of 7. And we thought, well, maybe we can take the shorter way out. That didn't work because
never take no shortcuts.
Never take no shortcuts. We were fine with the 4-wheel drive, the mud holes and everything. The van did great as far as that goes, but we hit a spot where there's some pretty high rocks, and I was just really worried with all the stuff we have hanging underneath the van. We might scrape, and I didn't want to deal with that, so we turned around on the trail. So do keep that in mind. But the main road seems to be fine for most vehicles. Given that there are over 20 tenting campsites, plus a couple of yurts and some cabins, I was surprised at how small the parking lot was, which is why I had to wait and you went to check it out. But you had a good time checking out the campsites and how peaceful and quiet it was back there.
Craig Lake State Park sits on land that was once owned by Frederick Miller, the founder of the Miller Brewing Company. And 3 of the park's 6 lakes are named after his children, including Craig Lake, which is behind me. One of the others is Teddy Lake, which is right down the road and is near one of the yurts. Later on, one of the other local lakes nearby was named the High Life Lake in honor of the Miller Brewing Company, which I think is kind of a fun fact. The park offers about 8 miles of trails around Craig Lake, as well as about 7 miles of the North Country Trail also run through the Craig Lake State Park area. So this is a great place to get out to do some scenic hiking where it's very quiet, or just enjoy some backpack-in only campsites. Once you're at the parking lot area, it's a good hike into the woods. The only camping available here is a couple yurts and mostly backpack-in only sites. One of those sites is here behind me. You've got 3 picnic tables, 3 fire rings, so you can fit a few tents back in here. But it's a pretty good ways into the woods down a path. But once you're here, it's serene. The lake is gorgeous. It's super quiet. The leaves are rustling, the birds are chirping, but other than that, I am the only person here right now, and it's really awesome. Craig Lake is popular for canoeing and kayaking, but the only way to get your canoe or kayak down there is to hike about a 1/4 mile from the parking lot to the water's edge. That means portaging whatever you're taking a good 1/4 mile to the water to even begin with. But then once you're out there, it's a really peaceful lake. And at different times of the year, you can see a lot of different wildlife. Beavers, otters, loons. And we've been told even moose or bear every once in a while make an appearance. So if getting out into the woods is your kind of thing, I think this would be a good place to do it. You just have to know that it's a rough way in and a rough way out, but once you're here, it's well worth it. At over 8,400 acres, Craig Lake State Park is sort of a outdoorsman's paradise. Between the wildlife, the boating, and the fishing, you've got quite a few options. One thing we did notice, and the state makes a pretty big deal about this, is that the fishing regulations are a little bit different for these parks than you'd find in other bodies of water that the DNR manages. I don't exactly understand all of it, but it actually goes back to the time when the Miller family owned it and they stocked the lake and they brought their friends in for fishing parties. And the DNR kept up that tradition. So it's artificial lures only, absolutely no live or dead bait of any kind. And it's pretty much all non-motorized boats only, so canoes, kayaks, and small rowboats. On Lake Cowayden, there is the option for a small motorboat, but even then there's some pretty good regulations. So make sure that if you're coming out here for fishing, which apparently it is really good fishing, you understand all those regulations because they are different than what you'd normally find.
It is a really cool park. Don't let the idea that it's the most remote park in the state scare you. Don't let the scary sign at the entrance road make you turn around. It's an option for a lot of people to get back there. Just be aware of different regulations. Be aware that it's different than most other state parks, and that's okay. That's what makes it really unique. So keep on trekking.
And we'll see you out there. Where it's very quiet, or just enjoy some backpacking, or just enjoy some backcountry, or just enjoy some backpack-in only campsites.